Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I thought the madness might take a pause. You know, Sheryl Swoops has gotten other analysts, other commentators to back down, like L. Duncan. And love him or hate him, Stephen A. fired back at Sheryl. Because when you're right, you're right. Let's get into it. Hey, you. I'm a brand new channel, so if you enjoy my content, please leave a like and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of September, and it's been a blast engaging with all of you in the comments. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now back to it.
And we also write about the fact that there's been some haterade being thrown in her direction. Okay? Because there's no excuse to have resentment towards her. And see, we don't want to address the big elephant in the room, but we ain't going to run from it today because Sheryl Swoops made news. Now, she made news last week when she sat up there and was applauding Indiana Fever players, but then forgot to mention Caitlinclark. She jumped all in my ass because I sat up there and said, hey, how you going to ignore Caitlinclark? You know what she brings to the table. How you just going to ignore her? That's not an accident. Sheryl Swoops is a champion. A champion. Look at her tweet and what she put up about me. You talk about whomever and whatever you want to on your podcast, correct? So why can't I? Also, did you listen to the entire episode? Nope. I have a personal relationship with these players, and they deserve recognition as well. That ain't the point, Sheryl Swoops. Yes, I did listen to your entire podcast. You didn't mention Caitlinclark. So I was right, number one. Number two, your personal relationship, what that got to do with your coverage? Ain't nobody said don't mention them. Ain't nobody said don't applaud them. Nobody told you to ignore them. What we're saying is if you're going to give the Indiana Fever all the credit in the world, how you going to mention the Indiana Fever without Caitlinclark's name even coming up? So then after that, Sheryl Swoops engages in levels of immaturity. There's no way to slice it. I'm not going to insult this champion, this great basketball mind, this phenomenally accomplished Hall of Famer. I'm not going to insult her. All I'm going to say is it was pretty damn immature to come back at me like that. Called me an effing coward because I called you out for not doing your job. So you on a podcast, that means you don't have to do your job? I mean, the bottom line is this. She engaged in a level of immaturity. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, to just bite at me like that, oh, why? Because what did I say? What did I say? You want to know what I said? Take a look at what I said last week about Sheryl Swoops. Respectfully, Sheryl Swoops, you have any idea how that makes you look? You have any idea how that serves to stain any kind of critique of Caitlinclark, because that gives fodder to those who believe she's being hated on and ostracized to some degree? Do you realize that, Sheryl Swoops, you're insane to do that? Let me tell you why you're insane to do that. Because Sheryl Swoops, you're one of the greatest players ever in the history of basketball. That's why. See, you won a championship in college at Texas Tech. You won 3 Olympic gold medals. You won 4 WNBA championships. You know basketball. You know basketball better than me. You know basketball than any of the pundits. You know basketball better than most of the men that play basketball. There is no way in hell you just accidentally left Caitlinclark's name out of that soliloquy that you dropped about the Indiana Fever. Stop it. You know that. Stop it. I mean, listen, the bottom line is this. There's a whole bunch of reasons that I'm quite sure Sheryl Swoops could come up with. Who can imagine that she's got stuff on her mind? Lord knows what she's got on her mind and what she wants to express. I get all of that. People can speculate until the cows come home about what that is. But one thing that's undeniable is that she seems to get offended with her objectivity being questioned, her professional objectivity. The problem is she's the one that brought her professional objectivity into focus by her own behavior. But I also understand why people would look at her like she's lost her ever-loving mind. Because you're literally putting the lack of professional objectivity on display for audiences to see, and then you're looking at us acting like what's wrong. It's like you spitting in people's face telling them it's raining.
Here, Stephen A. is backing up what he said with evidence, exactly what he said. He's not going to get caught in the L. Duncan trap where you get one minor thing wrong, even though you're correct, and you get taken down. And through and through, Stephen A's point is simple. It's You're too smart of a basketball player. You're a legend. We're giving you that grace to act like it's not some other reason that you're not acknowledging Caitlin Clark. And furthermore, he's also calling out the unprofessionalism that we see from her, and just firing back at these different pundits and almost trying to bully them into backing off or saying that they're wrong. And it didn't work with Stephen A. And it didn't work so much that not only did he have this segment, but he also brought on Nancy Lady Magic Lieberman, who was a legend in women's basketball and basketball in general, who replaced Sheryl Swoops in the Wings Fever broadcast. And Nancy is a GOAT. Hall of Famer, Olympian, one of the youngest ever. I think she was 17 when she was pulled up to the team. And oddly enough, in this interview too, she talks about how she was brought up similarly to what Caitlin's situation could have been, where you have this young player that's going to spark a lot of interest, and so you're doing it for the good of the game, knowing that whatever player you would brought in, no matter how good they were, deserving or not, that they would probably be riding the bench. They would be sitting on the bench during, the gold medal game. So why not bring Caitlin Clark? But arguably, that's a different argument we can get into. But not only is she an amazing, accomplished player, but she's also an amazing coach. She's a former WNBA coach, assistant coach for the Sacramento Kings, a championship coach for the Big Three, Ice Cube's league, and she's an analyst for the Oklahoma Thunder. And so she's accomplished. She knows what she's talking about. And obviously she had a lot of awesome things to say about Caitlin Clark on broadcast, and we'll run them right now.
In college, Caitlin Clark was named the winner of the Nancy Lieberman Point Guard of the Year 2 years in a row, if I remember correctly. I want to play something you said during the broadcast. Listen to this.
When I walked in here before the game, there were just hundreds of fans lined up.
Oh, yeah.
What Caitlin Clark has done for the game is generational. And I just, as a baller to a baller, I just want to say thank you to you, Caitlin Clark.
Absolutely.
For just lifting our game up, you and so many great players. But what you're doing, you're going to make all these women multimillionaires one day, like Tiger did, like Michael Jordan did. And we shouldn't hate on her. We should celebrate her, not tolerate her.
I couldn't agree more with Nancy, and she gets it. You had your time. It's about lifting up the next generation and celebrating a player like Caitlin Clark that is a catalyst for the WNBA to get where they want to go. I mentioned in the previous video that I felt like Sheryl struggles with social media literacy, and I love how Nancy gets it and is able to parse what is online keyboard warriors and what really matters to players. When asked about the haters, this is what Nancy led off with.
There's been a small cadre of individuals that obviously have come across in a different fashion. What is the thing that you're hearing, Nancy, as to what their justification for feeling a bit reticent about throwing that support in Caitlin Clark's direction?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. If you're talking about the keyboard warriors who hide behind 280 taps of their iPhone, yep, or whatever they're using, they're going to say something that, first of all, they don't even realize that the players in this league are friends with one another. Okay, so you might sit there and try to create this animosity, or you might try to bring in, racism in this, and there's no racism. You and I've been through this for a long time. I never came down the court and looked at somebody white or black and threw the ball to the white kid. I'm throwing it to the player who's the better player. They're trying to pit Angel and Caitlin against each other. They're friends, by the way. They're helping grow the sport. And for those who, it's not a Caitlin thing. It's a people thing. I mean, people were so jealous of Michael Jordan back in 1984 when he came out of, UNC. Chicago Stadium was half empty prior to him arriving. Then the stadiums were filling up. Then TV wanted him and the Bulls on every game.
When asked about her relationship with Sheryl, she gave us a lot of insight from her perspective.
I don't know what you can say about Sheryl Swoopes, but if there's anything that you could say, what would you want to say in terms of the narrative that has been put out there as it pertains to her coverage and her feelings about Caitlin Clark?
You know, I've known Sheryl since she was in college. I helped do her shoe deal with Nike in 1993, took her to her first SBs. I've known Sheryl, I've coached her, have a lot of respect for her. I called her when Caitlin was still playing at Iowa and she had just broken Maravich's record. And it was all over the place, as you and I have discussed, that you know, there was this quote by Sheryl that said, you know, Caitlin was, 25 years old. She was, however old, 24 years old. She was a fifth-year senior. Right. She was taking 40 shots a game. Her records were illegitimate. And I got off the treadmill and I called her as a friend. And I said, you know, you can say whatever you want. You can have your own opinion about anybody. But you do have to get the statistics right. I mean, facts matter. And if you just get ahead of this and just say, hey, I made a mistake on my numbers, then this thing is over and everybody respects you for your opinion. And, you know, you might like Boston. I might like the Yankees. You know, it's okay to have difference of opinions. Well, she got upset with me on the phone. And I was like, Sheryl, you know, I'm not doing anything to hurt you. I'm just sharing. We're talking. And so our relationship, it pretty much is not happening at this point. I tried to talk to her at the Final Four. Right. She didn't want to talk to me. My life's going to be good or great with or without Sheryl Swoops in my life. I'd rather have her in it.
Now, it's important to keep in mind that this is Nancy's point of view on the situation, and she doesn't reveal what Swoops said, but her motivations, which are fair and to the point. If you're going to have an opinion, that is fine, but get the facts straight. Facts matter. It's also believable from this recounting that Sheryl does not like to be challenged and will cut people off that have her best interest in mind. After this episode aired, Sheryl reassessed and I expect her to make a professional response. I'm kidding. She tweeted out that Nancy lied and basically implied a threat with, "You want to go there?" With the leaked texts, I now have no expectations of what she might share. She then followed up with a post quoting Nancy. The problem? Nancy did talk about it. Take a listen.
But let me tell you the difference. Right. The difference is when the Kennedy Carter thing happened, and I'm doing Michelle Beadle's podcast with Lou Williams and Chandler Parsons, and Michelle says to me, Nancy, what would you tell Caitlin Clark in that situation? And I said to Michelle, look, I'm not here to speak for Caitlin Clark. I'm not going to tell you that. Then she said, what would you do if somebody kind of blindsided you like that? And you know me, I'm straight from New York, straight from Rucker Park. I said, I would have yes. gotten up. I would have walked up to whoever did that to me. I would have punched him in the face. And you know, the expletive that I used. And I would have said, yes. F off. That is who I am. That is the concentric circle of who I am. And that's my era. And so to her point, Teresa Weatherspoon called me, my dear friend who I love, respect, and admire. She said, Nancy, I was disappointed what you said. And we had a conversation. And I said, Spoon, I didn't say she should punch Kennedy Carter in her face. I said, this is what I would do if I were blindsided. And I've known Kennedy since she was in high school here in Dallas. I think she's a hell of a player right. and should have been on the All-Star team.
She is.
But my comment about hitting her wasn't about her. But we had this conversation, which we apparently cannot have with me and Sheryl Swoops. And I still think she was incorrect about what she did. And, we all have to be professional. And I would like to thank the Wings and Bally's for putting me on the game and asking me if I would do it. I will do anything for women's basketball. I'm just a servant leader here. At one point in my career, I wanted to be the greatest of all time. And now I just want to be a great, person that supports this generation of greatness. So to your point, I think she created this firestorm she could put it out. And, you know, it's like I always tell people at this stage, your ego's not your amigo. Okay. Your ego's not your friend. We have to humble ourselves and do our job and just recognize that, you know, Caitlin might not be her cup of tea, but she's not doing anything to hurt Sheryl Swoopes. She admires Sheryl Swoopes and the Maya Moores and the Sue Birds and the legends that came before her. And I would dare say you can't find a soundbite this season of Caitlinclark saying anything derogatory about anybody. She says, I don't care that she chatters on the court.
Class.
Who doesn't?
So who isn't listening to the full podcast now, Sheryl? As we can see, Nancy explained her thought process wasn't a recommendation, but saying what she personally would do, which I wouldn't be surprised if a player that got blindsided was hot and fought back after something like that. Clark is too much of a professional, but nothing said by Nancy was bad in my opinion. Nancy goes on to mention a similar confrontation with Teaspoon over the Trinity Carter comments, and that they were able to stay connected despite a disagreement where Nancy's efforts with Sheryl failed. Sheryl needs someone in her life that can get through to her. At this point, based on her actions and the accounts of people that have tried to get through to her, she listens to one person, and that's Sheryl Swoopes. That's a dangerous recipe in this spiral. Thanks for watching and stay tuned because I'm sure this isn't the end of the saga. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll catch you next episode.